Hello, everyone. This is Settler's Lament. I'm here with Fritz Imperial, and this isn't too serious of a stream. We're just going to talk about Catholicism and anime, I guess. Just, I don't know, whatever. Though I think it seems like there's a decent number of people here right now, so I don't think we really need to wait too much. But is there anything you'd like to say before we get started?
Yeah. I wanted to. Well, you already kind of spoiled it for me. I want to talk about anime because, on an actual serious note of why, it's not just because if you notice, if you're on Catholic or traditionalist social media, is there seems to be a split that happens every 6 months or so of either people that really, really love anime and hate drugs, or really, really hate anime and love whiskey and cigars. Those are the two options, right? And it's just, and even if you don't like anime, even if you hate it, you have to admit there's something interesting about why is it that they're like, it's not just a coincidence that a huge number of people seem to actually really like anime. And in large part, it's because it feels like it's the last bastion of like modern, media that isn't just completely infested by the left, because it's not coming from the United States.
Yeah, no, it is somewhat refreshing for that, at least.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I find you're far more likely to see traditional Christian or European symbolism in anime than you are in most Western media.
Mm-hmm. Even if they don't really understand what it means, like they just think it looks cool, at least they're putting it in as opposed to explicitly leaving it out. But like, also, like, have you tried watching TV recently? It's awful. Everything is just, it's garbage. It's like I was watching a show with my parents the other night, and it's called Impractical Jokers. And the premise is it's four not funny guys, are basically put in situations where they have to act and like kind of like candid camera type of stuff where, they're pretending to be working at a dentist office and the other three are in a back room and they tell them, you have to say this, you have to say this. And if they don't do it, they have to do something where they do have to say it. And I was laughing, and I think it's not because, and I couldn't tell, is it because it's actually funny? Which, no, it's because it was so awkward and cringe that, like, just like the most awkward stuff in the world. That's why it was funny, but that's not why. That wasn't the prep point. But it's just awful TV. And then like, if you ever watch Red Letter Media, like they've been talking about the new Star Trek Picard series and just why it's just absolute garbage.
Yeah, no, I barely watch any modern media anymore, especially Western media. With the really big stuff, I'll watch it occasionally, or go to the theater to hang out with friends. But I don't know, it's just so awful. I almost never watch TV shows or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the explicit, the most explicit progressive programming, the constant LGBT stuff,
Mm-hmm.
is I don't know. I mean, it's almost in all shows, unless it's an explicitly Christian thing.
Which unfortunately, Christian media does not have a good reputation for being good.
Yeah. I mean, I watch that stuff sometimes with family members and Christian friends, but I don't know. It has about the same intellectual value as whatever the big TV shows are.
Problem though is, I think a lot of reason why people on the right like anime, it's not too dissimilar to why bronies originally existed, because there's a theory it's called the New Sincerity Movement, wherein they it feels like every animated series like Family Guy or The Simpsons is just so cynical that they just want something that isn't that. But at least with anime, I think that, at least it's somewhat more socially acceptable because it's not explicitly associated with furries. But yeah, and like it's not explicitly made for children.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do think there's a lot of really interesting anime that does get into interesting concepts. So it is, of course, a very broad concept. I mean, it's just Japanese animation.
Do you have
Um,
what are some of your favorites?
my number one favorite is probably Death Parade. Are you familiar with that?
No, I haven't heard of I don't think I've heard of it.
Okay, it's not very well known. There's just a single season in 2015, I think. And I wouldn't say that it's like amazing or anything, though I would say it has probably the single best anime OP of all time.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say it's an amazing series. But I mostly like things that deal with top. I mostly like. I'm sorry, I need to be right back.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll be. Should I fill in or? Yeah, the stream. If you didn't know, I streamed on Twitch yesterday. Chat. I'm playing Mass Effect for the first time, and I think it's both because I'm not that good at a lot of different types of games, but I hate the game. I don't think anybody likes the gameplay in. In the original Mass Effect game, but that's obviously not what carries it. It's its story. Really, everybody's Cyber Ninja Zero. Like I'm not that big into Shonen anymore, but everybody says like this. The newer Hunter x Hunter is the good one.
Okay, sorry, I'm back.
All right.
Yes, but Death Parade. And I'm not like a huge anime guy. I watch some stuff, obviously, but I don't watch it incredibly frequently. But yes, it's what I mainly find interesting is what I mainly find interesting is the is stuff that deals with like mystery or mystery or psychology, that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the premise of Death Parade is it's about when people die, they go to this game room where they need to play a game, and they don't realize that they're dead, and they believe that whoever loses the game will be killed, and the person that wins will get to stay alive. Though that's not what's going on at all. What's actually going on is the game is being played to judge them, to see if the person is good or bad, and if they die, I mean, if they're judged to be bad, then they'll go to hell, and if they are judged to be good, they'll be reincarnated.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a really interesting premise, and a lot of the episodes execute it relatively well. Though it's quite short, and it's only 12 episodes, and it doesn't seem like there'll ever be a sequel or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's for my favorite is Eden of the East, which came out in 2009, and largely in a lot of ways is kind of an argument for why monarchism is based, because the premise of that is essentially Japan at that point is dealing with a bunch of like economic crisis, and there's a bunch of terrorist attacks going on where missile strikes keep hitting Tokyo, but thankfully they're all in like abandoned areas. It's also like touching on the theme of NEETs, of how it's kind of both anti-NEET and it's anti-millennial and anti-boomer, where it kind of criticizes like a lot of it's kind of criticizing the underlying social problems in Japan, and I guess to an extent the West in general, of like older baby boomers that are kind of siphoning off and exploiting young people, and then young people just not working at all or not doing anything. But anyways, it starts where there's a guy who's a mastermind who's organizing a game where he's giving everybody he's giving 12 people 10 billion yen and a cell phone that they can basically use to do anything they want with the money. And it's basically your mission is you have to save Japan. What does that mean? Well, you have to figure it out. If you don't do what I think saving Japan is, you die. If you use the money for any selfish reasons, you die. And so it's set around a main character, a young man who Akira Takizawa, who has erased his own memory, and he's trying to figure out what he's doing in the game. And the animation's really beautiful, and surprisingly enough, like it alternates its opening, but one of them is Oasis they use an Oasis song for its opening, which I think is kind of different. But yeah, it's my favorite anime, and because in a way it's like it's a game in which it's forcing people, because I tried to watch a bit of the show called Mirai Nikki, and that's kind of the opposite premise, where there's a game wherein you have to use this special cell phone in order to play a game where you either die or you become a god. So you have to play this game for entirely selfish reasons. Whereas Eden of the East is you have to play this game, and we're trying to force people to be selfless. But somebody said Satsuki Kiryuin, who is the main antagonist in Kill la Kill, is a libertarian wet dream. She owns a whole city and sets rules. No, I think it's the opposite. She's an embodiment of authoritarianism, and that's kind of why I like her so much. She kind of like she paraphrases Orwell and says like fear is freedom, liberation is subjugation, but she says that as a good thing, as in Ordnung muss sein.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I've never seen either of those series. But yes, I mean, at its best, I find that anime can delve into topics and questions that are very rarely covered in Western media. And though, at its worst, a lot of anime is just like, trash entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Though again, that's sort of the problem with the term anime. Is, I mean, it literally just means Japanese animation, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's barely a meaningful thing to talk about Western animation.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I do think there's a lot of interesting things that are talked about in those series. And to answer this one guy from the chat's question, yes, I have seen Death Billiards, and it's also quite good. It's a short series. It's only 20 minutes each episode, and it's 12, 13 episodes if you count Death Billiards. And I definitely would recommend anyone that's interested. Think it sounds interesting to check it out.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you also like death games, you really need to check out the Danganronpa games. It's basically 80% visual novel, 20% kind of like Ace Attorney-esque. You have to discover the clues, because it's about these ultimate students who are each the best at what they do. Like, I'm the best at swimming, I'm the best at writing, I'm the best at, whatever. And they're trapped in a school or a location in which you have to kill somebody if you want to get out, but you also have to get away with it in a class trial. Okay. And the villain in it is basically, I consider them to be a much better kind of chaotic evil villain than the Joker. Like, just because it's why I don't want to watch My Hero Academia, even though I hear it's good. It's because I hate superheroes. I hate superhero genre. I hate it so much.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I don't watch very much media. I do watch the occasional superhero movie, again, just if I'm hanging out with friends or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. It all seems very it all seems very stale and like it's the same thing over and over again.
Mm-hmm. And it also is like with Star Wars, because I hate that I like The Mandalorian, because I know that just like what happened with Lost, with Game of Thrones, with all of these big shows everyone gets into, they tend to try and start out strong, but the writers tend to have absolutely no idea what they're doing, and it's going to become It's just going to become disappointing, most likely. But it's like the thing, though, that I find more like disgusting personally that about the whole Western media movies, Star Wars, Marvel things, is it's not so much, the movies are bad or they're filled with SJW stuff. It's I hate to say it, but it's the fat man-child, it's the fat white man-children that keep screaming that it's not like it was in the 80s. Why isn't Star Wars like I remember it anymore? It's like, if you need to define your life by a TV show by a movie series from the 80s, you need to change your priorities.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You got it.
Yeah, no, the whole, I don't know, I do somewhat, I can't remember who it was, but I can't remember who I heard say this, but I remember hearing some other YouTuber talk about that sort of phenomena, and I do somewhat sympathize with people that have those sorts of obsessions. I mean, I don't have any sort of fierce obsession like that to any particular piece of media, but the way that our sort of culture has been destroyed in the past couple of decades. I think a lot of that is people just sort of naturally trying to cling on to something. And the best that they really can find for a lot of people is unfortunately this, this crappy media. And I wish they could find something better, I guess, to get to the other part of the title, something like, say, Catholicism. But for a lot of people, they just, I don't know, there's a real sort of crisis of meaning in the modern West.
Yeah, and in a way, like, you look at these things like Star Wars and like all the great movies of, say, the 80s, and it's like the gas has just run out on creativity, it seems like, because like everything just has to be recycled, and they keep remaking movies that were good to begin with, but like, you don't do that. You remake bad movies that had some promise, but like they just don't have creativity, but people keep seeing them. I mean, the thing is, like, originally I was just hesitant to say, oh, these sheeple, I'm the big brain that like is above this, but at some point I'm just like, you know what, I am. These people don't stop seeing these shitty movies. Sorry for swearing, but they just I mean, it's why, like, I want to go out, even if like they're filled with a lot of, like, I'll take a kind of SJW-esque movie over a big budget dumb Hollywood, because at least it can be interesting, but it's everywhere and it's almost impossible to ignore. Like, I watched the movie 1917, which was really, really good, but like they had to add like black, like every one, it's like 1 in every 20 British soldiers was black, which no, there wasn't diversity in Britain at that time, but they had like the Sikh or Indian soldiers that did actually fight in World War I and were quite, quite aggressive or brave soldiers, and that's the diversity. That's all the diversity you need. You don't need to make it look like, Britain was as diverse as it is now all the time, and because that particularly pisses me off of that historical revisionism, to say that no, history was never things were all. It's, to me, it's worse than the idea that, oh, all your ancestors were evil racists. It's them saying, no, Britain was always, we're rewriting history. Britain was always a diverse paradise.
Yeah, it is disgusting, and they, I do think that's a big problem. But I think the chief problem with modern Western media is more that they just don't know how to tell like archetypal stories anymore.
No, they know how to recycle things and make big explosions.
Yeah, like I mean, the LGBT stuff and the forced diversity is all like gross and bad and incorrect. But the real core of the problem with modern with modern Western media is that they don't even understand like what an archetype is, what telling these types of stories is supposed to mean. They just they just cycle out things that will get them views, and that's all they care about.
And the sad thing is like, you keep hearing for years and years, well, this can't go on. Fatigue's eventually going to set, and it's eventually going to stop, but it doesn't. People don't stop seeing these movies. I remember another great YouTuber from Canada, I know, Endeavor. I don't know if you've talked with him yet. Royal Endeavor.
Yeah, I've done a live stream with him before.
But he made, like, on BitChute, he made a great video where it's a plea of, please, whatever you do, just do not give these companies money, because it's the only way it'll stop. Which is why I did not, Disney could come after me, but I did not legitimately acquire My Mandalorian. I would not pay for that. It does, somewhat feel hopeless, but with this just sort of boycotts and stuff. But we should make sure to give them as little money as possible. But yeah, even with anime, it's like Western media is we don't want to have any higher ideas. We don't want to look towards any higher ideas, both because we just want to recycle content, and we hate these higher ideas because they're evil and racist. And
Yeah, I
in the
mean
song,
the only higher ideas that they can point towards is equality and racism bad. That's basically it.
it's my thought. I think I said this on a live stream before. I can't remember exactly when, but it's, to me now, superheroes are basically, I think in a lot of ways it's a progressive's wet dream, in which it's you have this small army of Ubermensch who are basically invincible and are fanatically loyal to upholding the neoliberal world order. Essentially, the whole point of superhero movies is, it's not just Batman is fighting against, your average crooks. It's not just, Iron Man doing this. It's anybody that opposes the neoliberal world order, it will be put down with lethal force. It's kind of like the same thing with guns, where the left has this fantasy where they will come in and with the U.S. military and start shooting Southern gun owners.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that.
Mm-hmm. But what's interesting is, but I was just thinking of the neoliberal world order, is that's essentially what Star Trek is. Have you ever seen Star Trek or any?
I'm familiar with
Okay.
with how it's quite blatantly like the progressive wet dream.
Mm-hmm. But at least it's like since Gene Roddenberry came up with it decades and decades ago, it's obviously not nearly as bad. But it's the distributists made a great point that with people like in a progressive utopia like this, as we can see now, like, you can't get people like Captain Picard or William Riker, or you absolutely certainly can't get Captain Picard, because Picard's character he's like this romantic old, French aristocrat that, loves Shakespeare and like these old songs. But you can't get people like that in a progressive utopia. They don't exist.
Yeah, it's what progressivism always does. It destroys itself. I remember, I don't know much about the Star Trek series, but from what I do know, the Captain Kirk in the original series was quite proud and happy to go around the universe enforcing his ideals on everyone. And now progressives would probably call that racist.
Though at the same time, that's essentially what. Well, and that's the difference. Is in the Next Generation, Captain Picard is the opposite, where he fully believes in the Prime Directive, in that he's willing to let planets die and destroy themselves, because the idea of we do not have the right to interfere with a planet's development. But the most interesting of the Star Trek series, or the one I think conservatives and our elephant in the room, Razorfist, his favorite series is Deep Space Nine, which is the one where it was made after Roddenberry died, and it's set during the last few seasons of Next Generation, and it was on in the 90s, and it's basically, it challenges a lot of these ideas, and it shows like, if the Federation is strained enough, they will start cracking on their ideals. And it also blatantly starts out in the first episode that actually the metaphysics are real, atheism is wrong, because gods actually do exist.
Okay, yeah, that sounds interesting. I don't know much about it.
Mm-hmm.
And to Cyber Ninja, to answer your question, I do. I mean, I'm not totally familiar with this Brazilization hypothesis or whatever, but I do sort of consider that to be the nightmare endpoint, that the neocons were right, and that all that's going to happen is, the Muslims will come, we'll turn them into progressive Muslims. They'll essentially be like, Muslim Episcopalians, and we'll all just have sodomy and abortion for the rest of human history. Mm-hmm. I actually personally don't think that will happen, but that is by far the neocons being right is by far the sort of like nightmare endpoint.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's something like what the progressive, what I know they're pretty much gone now, the skeptic community, right? Like their idea, well, Muslims have to assimilate to Western European values, but the thing is, their idea of Western European values is atheism and gay marriage. It's like, I don't want Muslims to accept that. I don't want anyone to accept that. I think, it's basically you're offering, it's like you tell Muslim immigrants you have to assimilate to our culture, but they're like, you don't have a culture. Your culture is explicitly, we hate any of our traditions. And so you're basically asked them to either commit homicide by destroying the host country or suicide by destroying their own culture.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just sent out a tweet about this earlier today. And yeah, I mean, in the battle between progressives and Muslims, it's not a hard dichotomy for me. I'd much rather take the side of Muslims than progressives. I mean, I don't want either. I don't want England to become Muslim majority or anything like that. But when the debate is literally, do we cut off children's penises, or I don't know, do women wear hijabs? Like that's not a difficult dichotomy.
Thing you say that is, Muslims do that because with the male and female, circumcision, but at least they don't cut off the whole penis.
Yeah.
But what was I gonna say? Is the thing is that what's scary about Islam, and I think what liberals, and that's generally what I refer to when I talk about classical liberals like Sargon and whatever, is their fallacy is like, it's not that Islam doesn't have a successful civilization. It's that it does, is what makes it scary. Is that they, like, the reason why an Islamic civilization started in the first place was because Muhammad and the early caliphate basically we have this whole religious social structure of civilization that we can bring order to, and it worked really well. And they can do that again. Liberalism doesn't have a culture.
Yeah, it's totally self-destructive. I actually, again, on this sort of Brazilization hypothesis, I think it like I said, I think that is the nightmare endpoint, but I don't think it is likely at all. I've actually been saying for a while, we just a few years ago had Canada's 150th birthday. And I think 150 years from now, Canada will be reactionary. It just won't necessarily be the type of reactionary I want. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. Progressivism seems very self-destructive to me. I don't see it taking on at all outside of the Western world. Maybe if we expand that a little bit to certain parts of East Asia, but other than that, I don't think they're able to reproduce themselves literally. Wherever agnosticism and progressivism takes hold, birth rates drop to basically zero. It seems to be literally evolutionary maladaptive.
Well,
and they rely on a constant influx of reliable voters. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what will happen when Western countries become 30-40% Muslim. I don't think they're going to continue voting for social democrats at that point. I think they're going to have their own political force.
Well, they already do in Belgium.
Yeah, I know. Or the Netherlands, I think.
No, it's Belgium has a Sharia for Belgium party.
Okay.
Which is wonderful. But at least this time with the second migrant crisis, at least European leaders seem at least somewhat, lucid enough to realize what's happening and that they can't do 2015 again. They're just saying, no, we're not letting them in. Because I know this is explicitly Erdogan saying, like, using immigrants as ammunition, as political ammunition, which is disgusting. Like, he's one of the most disgusting leaders I've seen. And he's in NATO. Isn't that wonderful? But I also think that I don't know if it's a black pill or if it's just maybe a wake up call that, because I am not planning on voting for Donald Trump this year. I think I'll probably just vote for my local Republicans and that's it. Because clearly, a huge number of the people that initially kind of jump-started his campaign, the young kind of millennial reactionaries, he hasn't really done anything they want. Like him, anytime he talks about wanting more and more, as many legal immigrants as possible, or, him saying pro-LGBT stuff, it's just sickening.
Yeah, no, it is annoying. If I was an American, I honestly would probably vote for him. But I don't know. The main reason I'd vote for him is I sort of think of these things and what narrative is being created. And in Canada, I don't think I'll ever vote for the Conservative Party again because they're completely worthless. They don't push back on any of this stuff at all.
So
our front runners in the Canadian Conservative Party leadership contest right now are like bragging about how the Conservative Party is the party of immigration, and stuff. So I don't think I would ever vote for the Conservative Party again. I did when I was 18, but I'm pretty sure that was my first and last time. Sorry, I'll try to turn down my mic a little bit.
The thing is, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. But in terms of Trump, the reason I'd probably vote for him is more of just sort of the narrative that I think it's creating. That he does that, even if he isn't actually personally has his sympathies that way, he still is widely perceived as a part of the sort of backlash against progressivism. And I think it's useful in a narrative sense for him to win again.
I don't know. I don't even really see him. I don't think a lot of us see him that way anymore.
I mean, I'm not even saying that we see him that way, but the left definitely sees him that way.
Okay, but
so I mean, I don't really care who you vote.
Well, apparently at this point, the left sees Joe Biden's that way.
Yeah, I guess.
But what I'm saying is that one, I guess, kind of optimistic note is that like the party I kind of like the most is the AfD in Germany, and it's like Germany is like touted as like being the most, the most cocked country in the West, but they at least have an actual right-wing party. Like it feels like it's a Republican. It's like if the Republican Party had a little more bite to it with the Alternative for Deutschland party.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of places in Europe seem relatively encouraging. Spain, for example, just about a year ago, their right-wing populist party Vox were completely irrelevant. But today, today they're polling at like almost 20%, like about 18%. And that's in about a year. They went from like 1 to 3% to 18%. And more importantly, the establishment parties in Spain are willing to work with Vox. I do think AfD does seem pretty good from what I know about them, and I'm definitely not an expert on German politics. But the main issue I think that they have is that the establishment parties in Germany are absolutely unwilling to work with AfD under any circumstances, where it's unlike that in most other places in Europe. Even in Sweden, some of the moderate parties have signaled they might work with the Sweden Democrats one day. In Italy, Lega Nord leads the center-right coalition. Like I said, in Spain, Vox and the two sort of moderate conservative parties are all happily working together. So in Germany, AfD has been polling like just about 20% for several years now, I think. And if they can't get any sort of breakthrough where they have other factions willing to work with them, I don't know if they'll ever be able to affect any meaningful change.
The saddest, I think, situation in Europe is probably Ireland, in which I've heard is basically all three major parties are exactly the same. Like there is no and it seems like Ireland is just the left flexing their muscle and trying to display how fast they can destroy a traditional Western country.
It is that does seem to be a place that has, at least currently, not much going well. Though I mean, like I said, a little over a year ago, it looked like there was no serious pushback in Spain. And Vox is almost at 20% now in the polls. So hopefully things will be able to change quickly in Ireland.
I mean, Hungary, Poland, and a bunch of Eastern European countries are fine, and Austria seems to be going right wing. But
I mean, the most recent things in Austria seem pretty bad. Are you familiar with that? The BoomerCon party made an alliance with the Greens.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But, there was a big scandal with the right wing populist party, the Austrian Freedom Party, I think it's called, where they were like taking bribes from some Russian guys or something like that, or they were trying to. It was like a sting operation.
Speaking of the Russians, because it's like, if you believe the left's narrative, essentially we should just surrender to the Russians immediately, because apparently they can do anything. They have mind control powers. They can control every. I'm surprised nobody's made a point that, like, well, Boris is kind of a stereotypical Russian name. Boris Johnson is a Russian puppet, therefore.
Yeah. It does. The Russia point is actually an interesting one, because I've spent a lot of time in progressive communities, both on the internet and in real life. And though from the establishment left, the whole Russia hysteria seems to be hegemonic, from almost all of the actual leftists I've met in real life, they all think it's retarded. I've had professors that have made fun of it and say that it's obviously BS. They'd never say that against almost any other left-wing narrative. But yeah, I don't know. That seems to be something mostly just pushed by the mainstream sort of left. But I don't know if the actual sort of progressive.
I think it's the scary thing is it's like a leftover boomer thing of people like Hillary Clinton and whatever that still think that Russia is the Soviet Union. Yeah. Even though in a lot of ways things have reversed now, in which Russia has kind of gone pretty right wing. But speaking of right wing, do you want to just touch on the elephant in the room that is we got banned by so much for the tolerant conservatives?
Yeah, that was. I don't think I have much more to say about the whole Razor Fist situation. I mean, I'm almost certain he isn't watching, but in case if Razor Fist ever happens to see this or any of his fans do, I don't hate him or anything.
No,
whatever. His YouTube channel's name is literally Rageaholic. I kind of expect him to act more or less like that. I imagine that's his.
It's his stick.
Yeah. And so yeah, I'm not offended or anything. I'm happy to bury the hatchet if he ever happens to see this. For people in the chat, you can watch my latest video if you want to know the details. But basically, me and Fritz Imperial got into a short Twitter argument with Razor Fist, where he clearly just didn't know what he was talking about some pretty basic concepts, mainly to do with the Middle Ages. And we were just pointing out that he has no clue what he's talking about at all, and he just kind of spurged out at us and blocked us.
And then I posted your video on his Discord, which I was part of, and then apparently I got kicked off of that. But I think the point in your video that was the most poignant though was the fact that when he responded to you saying that I'm using totalitarian interchangeably with monarchism, and you pointing out that's exactly what the left does with terms.
Yes. Yeah. No. I mean that's not just what the left does. The left just does it because they're hegemonic.
I saw this coming for a while because I guess he's gotten into a really he's been too much into an Ayn Rand bout recently. Which about my thoughts on Ayn Rand is I despise her ideology. I think it doesn't work, and she was kind of a selfish, bad person. But you really can't blame her considering her early life is basically the Imperial Russian government and then the Soviet Union ruining her life. She might be upset with the state. My biggest point is that you can't the idea the stuff is not applicable because the idea of the state is a modern idea. It's something that didn't arise until at least the 17th century. There wasn't at least in Western Europe, there was no bureaucratic state or organization. You didn't have monopoly on force either. You had a pretty decentralized balance between nobility, clergy, and merchant guilds.
Yeah, no, I mean the entire Middle Ages are almost the definition of decentralization. For any of my frequent viewers, the sort of thing that I'm trying to accomplish with this channel, if you take a look at my videos, you'll see a lot of them are sort of drama stuff. They're talking about e-celebs. The goal I have with that is not I don't care about the stupid e-drama. That my goal with this is to usually get at a bigger point.
Yeah.
And that was what I tried to do with the Razor Fist video. The main point there is that there's a dichotomy that exists inside of his mind, that everything is either liberal and democratic or it is totalitarian. And this is a sort of mind virus that exists in most people's minds that live in the West. And not just on that issue, on many different issues, where our brain's on autocomplete. We have these dichotomies. Everything is this or it's that. And if it doesn't fit into my neat thing that I'm okay with, then it's automatically the other thing.
It also has to do with history, where the left believes history essentially started in 1945. The big bad Hitler was Satan, and their job is for the past 75 years has been trying to fight the lesser demons and stop it from coming back. For classical liberals like Razorfist, is history started in 1776, and that literally any nation there wasn't real civilization until the United States. Because something that's interesting that you'll point out is a lot of these types of conservatives, I guess kind of like the Steven Crowders and the Dinesh D'Souza's and the people that are that pro-America, is like, there's nothing wrong with being patriotic, but it's them basically saying like, well, we're in favor of Western civilization. Okay, so you mean European and like European diaspora civilization. And they're like, so does that include like Germany or like Eastern Europe? We're like, no, that's socialist and left wing. Okay, does that include like Italy, Spain, and France? No, no, those are socialists. No, okay, so they're not Western civilization. No, it's the Atlantic. It's the Atlantic. Oh, so you think Britain is in Canada are Western? No. Only America's the real civilization. Oh, does that include California, New York? No. It's really just Texas is the only. It's something. It's like only like Texas is the epitome, is the only place where real civilization is. And you think like. So basically, in World War II, we accomplished absolutely nothing if basically it's just as bad as the Nazis are now in Europe. Now, that's not what they believe, but like they still believe it's not really Western civilization anymore. And then go ahead.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. The whole sort of boomer con American free market stuff is really kind of gross. I mean, I like capitalism. Capitalism's cool, especially because capitalism mostly is a meaningless term the way the left uses it.
I don't even like the term now because I think the phrase capitalism is something Karl Marx himself invented.
Yeah, no, but I mean, when leftists use capitalism, they mostly just mean reality. I 100% mean that. It like one of the things I see, like, you'll never hear like a leftist intellectual say this, but the thing that I find really common among just normie lefties is they'll say stuff like, "Oh, it's disgusting that you have to work to like survive." Like, why is that the case? Why do you need to work to just not starve to death? Now, first off, that's obviously blatantly not true in any welfare state. You can survive without working. But even more importantly, that's not a thing with capitalism. It's nothing to do with our economic structure that says you need to work to survive. That's the basic facts of reality, that if you stand around, food doesn't just grow out of the ground.
If you do not work, you do not eat.
Yeah, I mean, that's in the Bible. That's yes. In the Soviet Union's constitution, and it's literally just a fact of reality that it requires labor to make things exist. That the most basic things like the most basic things like farming or whatever, anything that will sustain current populations, not even having our iPhones or whatever, but just the most basic things of not starving to death, requires labor to happen. And that's cool. I think there are welfare states and stuff that can help take care of people. I think that's a good thing. We should do that. I'm not saying I'm against all that, but when you have some normie leftists saying, "Oh, it's disgusting you to work to survive," they're just retarded. That's because of reality. That's not because of our economic structure.
It's also like fascinating. I know he's a meme, but I kind of like Stefan Molyneux because I think he's coming from a good place, especially how he has recently basically said that even though I'm not a Christian, he's one of, I guess you could call good atheists, in which I guess him and Razorfist are similar in that even if they don't believe themselves, they both understand that they would far prefer to live in a nice Christian society than an atheistic one. But like he was doing a speech like in Australia, kind of trying to unravel the myth of white privilege, and he talked about like something about how like I don't know how he got into this tangent, but he talked about how it's amazing how much food you can grow in your own garden, and that's the thing is like people I think are surprised when they actually learn real skills because they don't know that human beings are actually capable of doing things like you can grow food, you can put things in the ground, and food appears, and it's also pretty delicious.
Yeah. To respond to another comment from Blast. The issue with Whig history is it's not like the issue that I think you're probably having is that it is true that history has progressed over the past like 2,000-3,000 years. That is I think a factual statement. But the key issue there is what are we defining as progress? Like it is true that we have better farming tools in 2020 than we did in 1020. But that's not the issue. The issue that people on the right take with Whig history isn't that there are certain ways, mainly in terms of technology, that progress has happened. The issue with Whig history is the idea that society as a whole, culture, morals, are all developing towards something which is better. And it's mostly a linguistic trick, because this is actually something I would like to make a full video on one time. But it's a linguistic trick of the word progress, where the word progress can mean many things. Progress is actually meaningless if we're not defining what type of progress are we talking about. So it's definitely true that in 2020 we have better farming equipment than we did 1,000 years ago. But the linguistic trick of Whig history and of progressivism is that, well, if we have progressed in that sense, then that means we've progressed in other senses. And there are even certain ways in which morality has gotten better, I suppose. I know if you read about people, there are many ways in which it hasn't, but there are even.
I mean, the way I would define it is that morality doesn't change. It's just certain people.
Yeah.
It's been it's been implemented in more true ways to the natural law of God.
Yeah.
In that, using the example that in the ancient world, infanticide was perfectly acceptable. By the Middle Ages, Christianity had largely stamped it out, in which you can't just you can't just have the paterfamilias decide whether or not your child lives or dies. Like if anybody did that in the Middle Ages, they'd probably be considered just a murderer.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So it is true in certain sense. And yes, that's true. We're all Catholic here. I'm sure every single person in chat is Catholic.
And if you're not, you need to become Catholic.
Yes, of course. But so of course morality is objective and it does not change. But moral senses of people has gotten better in certain respects. So the issue with but in many ways. The issue with Whig history is in many ways moral senses have degraded. Again, for Catholics, the most obvious example of this is abortion. But there are many other cases too in which the sort of technological progress, which is fairly linear, does not at all map on at all similarly with the moral progress that we've experienced.
Mm-hmm. The thing that I find weird though is that I'm strangely if people literally everybody on Catholic social media says who are your favorite philosophers? Well, Thomas Aquinas and Augustine / Aristotle. I'm the one weirdo that has to say I kind of like Hegel and Confucius. Hegel is the weird one because I think it's kind of it's the filthy the eternal Anglos took Hegel's idea and didn't understand anything it's kind of like what Marx did too, is they took Hegelianism and they didn't know really what he was talking about, because Hegel did believe in the idea of progressive ideas, and he said one of his quotes is that the history of progress can be defined as the expansion of freedom. But the thing is I don't think what he meant is freedom and is what liberals consider freedom are the same thing. My favorite quote of his is, "To be free is nothing, to become free is everything." And I think that kind of expresses the problem with the ideology of liberalism, in the sense of, well, we want people to be free, and then you can. The thing is, the follow-up question that they don't want people to ask is, free to do what?
Yeah.
And it's my idea is that and also because Hegel's his idealistic country was basically early 19th century Prussia, which is not the United States of America.
Yes, yeah. And that, I mean, I guess getting back to the point that was being made earlier, that is sort of the real problem with the American boomer con understanding of things, that everything is socialism versus capitalism,
or that everything is either free that America, there is America, and then anything outside of that is just evil and not real, or is just kind of it's the dark part in The Lion King, where that's where the light doesn't touch Kimba. That was a real kind of thing that made me not like Disney, because I find the history of I don't know why, but I find the corporate history of Disney fascinating. There's a great channel called Defunct Land, where he talks about kind of old Disney attractions and the history of that, and kind of all the weird corporate decisions. And I guess I just find that all fascinating. But that was a wake-up call when I learned that The Lion King was basically just directly stolen from an anime. But yeah, even my dad told me, because my dad is basically just a boomer conservative, that the trick ever that the Enlightenment figures pulled on everybody was to convince them that the Middle Ages, that there was such a thing as the Dark Ages were the Middle Ages. They had to make it seem like everything before us, before you gave us power, was evil, and the Catholic Church was this evil, corrupt, monstrous organization, and that people had no freedom, and that basically they had this idea that in the Middle Ages, like, peasant farmers were just yearning to be free landowners, and they hated their landlords, and they hated everything about their lives. They didn't have a voice. No, it's not true at all. People probably were, especially compared to today, like the influence of the government was almost nil on the average person's life, especially considering, again, what we consider the state doesn't really exist in the Middle Ages.
Yes, yeah, that's true. I for anyone that's interested in, I'm certainly not an expert at all in medieval history. But for anyone that would just like a sort of intro guide to it, I'd highly recommend the book called Life in a Medieval Village. It's just like a second year university history book, and it's not it's not like super big brain expert stuff, but it does give a really good and relatively short overview of what life was like for the average peasant in medieval England. And that was the main source I used for that Razor Fist video. And I'm not a medievalist. I'm not saying that we need to all return to feudalism or something like that. But I do think it's important to break the sort of hegemonic narrative we have of the Middle Ages just being a bunch of poor, oppressed peasants that were all just yearning for freedom.
Mm-hmm. It's the BS of Rousseau's man is born free and everywhere he's in chains. No.
But, it's just wrong.
But if we could go back to, like, because I like talking about culture and everything, it's the reason why I wanted to move to doing streaming. And I'm planning on doing a whole big, like, long critique of Stellaris when the DLC comes out later this month, because, like, you look at YouTube and the entertainment part of it, and the gaming entertainment part of it is virtually, there's almost no Christians and almost no conservatives whatsoever. And you think that's an opportunity for Christians to actually get into that and talk about things that isn't just theology and politics.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It actually, I remember there's one thing that's really stuck in, I mean, that's not what I'm trying to do with this channel, clearly.
Yeah.
But I do think that's a very important thing for conservatives and Christians to try and get into. I remember very distinctly Lauren Southern back when she was a thing, and I know that's all, she's quite controversial now, but that's besides the point. I remember
really. I think the last she left. Apparently, all she did is she left Twitter and then became a trad wife. She just got married to have a kid.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, I know there's a lot of theories about what exactly was going on with that, and I don't know or really care or have any desire to get into it, honestly. But there was something that she said, I remember many years ago now, where she was talking about, like, BuzzFeed, and the regular sort of stuff BuzzFeed does, not the 40 reasons why white people are evil, just like the sort of regular cooking stuff or whatever that they do. And she said, maybe we should make a conservative BuzzFeed, but like, who actually wants to do that? And I thought, no, that's exactly what we need. We need a conservative BuzzFeed. We need, our based Zoomer millennials sharing, just regular stuff that has a conservative tint to it. Or
it's not even so much that it's that it's the undercurrent, or they know that this is where the people stand that make this, but it's not outright political propaganda like 99% of Christian movies are. Yeah. No, I mean that is of course the problem with right-wing media, because you think of everybody thinks, well, all movies are liberal, have a liberal tint, but anytime people think there's a conservative tint to a movie, 99% of the time it's like, oh, Dinesh D'Souza made a stupid documentary.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I mean, I know lots of Christians, both evangelical and Catholic, and I know a lot of them that really enjoy the God's Not Dead series. And okay, if you enjoy it, if you think it helps you, whatever. I'm not going to get
stupid, but you can enjoy it.
Okay, I wouldn't say that. But whatever. If they enjoy it, like, I'm not going to get in the way of that. But the really influential Christian, works aren't that. The really influential Christian works, like I remember I heard one guy once say, I can't remember who it was, someone on YouTube, I think, say the most important conservative book of the 20th century was Lord of the Rings. And that's probably true. And it's not, it is incredibly conservative in every single way. But it's also, there's nothing explicitly conservative about it. And that is really the type of stuff that that we need to make. If we want that boomer Andrew Breitbart culture comes, government or politics is downstream from culture. I mean, it's not by making these stupid pure flicks movies. It's by actually owning cultural artifacts. And
Louis the 14th, he said that won't work. PragerU is already suing Twitter and YouTube for free speech suppression. That's not the point. We don't want to be PragerU. That's the type of channel we do not want. Because they're and it's not just because Prager University sucks. It's because they're just political.
No, it's no. Like I said, though, conservative BuzzFeed. When I say conservative BuzzFeed, I don't mean anything that's explicitly political at all. Because the vast majority of stuff BuzzFeed does is not the 40 reasons why white people are evil. That's what you'll see in conservative circles, and a million people make a response to.
Yeah.
But if you actually go to just BuzzFeed, the vast majority of it is just inane, normal stuff. It's about, I don't know, like cooking or baking, or it's about movies or whatever. The vast majority of it has nothing to do explicitly with politics. And that's what I mean. PragerU is kind of like a conservative BuzzFeed when it comes to sort of the political stuff BuzzFeed does, but that's all it ever does, other than maybe the occasional book review.
I would say that, like, somebody said, like, Warhammer 40K is the new Lord of the Rings. Can you ban that person? The problem with 40K is it is certainly interesting because the lore is so extensive, but the problem is that Warhammer 40K, it portrays, like, it's, I guess, quote unquote, protagonists are the most hyper xenophobic religious totalitarians, but it gets away with it. Like, in any other context, you'd think why would that even be acceptable anywhere in the in mainstream pop culture? But it's because it's taken. I think the trick they pull is that it's taken to such an extreme that to the point of absurdity. So ironically, if you had a Warhammer 40K where the totalitarianism and the right-wing aspects of it were reined back a few degrees, then it would become too untenable for pop culture.
No, it's. I mean, I'm not totally familiar with 40K, but from what I do know, it's sort of clearly, it's sort of clearly done to such an extent that, like, no one could really take it seriously.
It's like, and I guess it's partially why the right likes it, because it can also be kind of an aspect of culture jam. But Cyber Ninja Zero said the message of Lord of the Rings pushed the boomer message of power corrupts, and absolute not. Really, it's more that good and evil are absolutes, because it ends with what Aragorn becomes king. He becomes the most powerful person. It doesn't end with him saying Gondor now has to become a liberal democracy. It ends with him becoming king.
Yeah, no, I think that's sort of a boomer reimagining of the message of Lord of the Rings. I do see how you can get that from it, but I don't think that really was the goal of it.
That, even though apparently Lord Acton was a Catholic, he's the one that came up with that quote. I hate that quote to no end, because what's actionable about it is it basically say, okay, so we should make sure nobody has any real political power whatsoever because they're going to be corrupt, or so basically there are no good kings. Or my bigger point was that it implies that Genghis Khan was corrupt, as opposed to, no, like, you can say what he did was evil, but, like, he was doing what he wanted to do. Like, that's not being corrupt.
Yeah. But no, yeah, and I mean, in terms of Lord of the Rings, I'd say the message isn't at all. I don't think the original message was at all power corrupts. I think the message was more that that there can be no union between good and evil. That the ring is no, it's not that the ring is power. It's that the ring is evil. That there is no good use of the ring.
Yeah.
It's not like like Fritz said, monarchy is power. And
the throne of it's like the throne of the ring is evil and also grants power. There's no good way to use it. The throne of Gondor is not evil.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more like legitimate authority versus versus illegitimate authority.
Or it's not so much that, I mean, Sauron, it's not really so much that Sauron doesn't have legitimate authority. I think any political scientist would say, yeah, he has full authority, legitimate authority in Mordor. It's just that he's fucking evil.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between that, though, and because I guess in the deeper lore, it's interesting that he's just a representation of evil, yet like the right ring, like we hate how how absolute good and evil is portrayed in Harry Potter, because as Argent Templar points out very well, in the Harry Potter universe, Voldemort's not evil because like he's not evil for any like interesting reason. He's a caricature of like the fascist right, and it's how the left views the people on the right wing. Is it's not like that they're like delusional or that they just came to a different conclusion that they don't agree with. It's that they're just crazy and evil.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, it's been a long time since I've read or watched the Lord of the Rings series. I don't totally remember what happened to the other rings. Weren't the other rings made by Sauron too?
Yes.
This is in response to Cyber Ninja.
Oh wait,
again.
were they? I don't remember, but yeah,
I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But
I am very glad that the movies were made. Somebody years ago told me that, like, isn't it such a good thing that the Lord of the Rings movies were made when they were? Because they were made in the early 2000s when they could have good enough CGI to make it look nice, and they could have all the effects they wanted, but like they didn't have. It wasn't quite as SJW stuff wasn't quite as bad yet, so they didn't have to put in black characters where they shouldn't have been, or they didn't have any gay characters. Even though, of course, everybody has to say, well, Frodo and Sam had homoerotic tendencies. It's like, and that's one of the most sickening things about the sexual revolution, is that basically this is part of critical theory, which is why you have to look at Shakespeare works and show, oh, there's gay themes in this. And it's because people today can't comprehend the idea that men could have platonic love for each other in deep friendships.
Yeah, no, it's yeah. I mean, I certainly don't think there is anything that could really be called gay in the Lord of the Rings movies.
No.
I mean, like I said, it has been a while since I watched it, but that is a really disgusting redefinition that the progressives do.
Mm-hmm. But back on anime. Sorry if that's kind of steering this off track, but
no problem.
The point is that what's interesting to me and is that why the right is, because fan service is, I think, the big elephant in the room. That's the third time I've said that this stream. I'm sorry, but is fan service in anime is that it can be very gratuitous. Like right now, I'm trying to get through the Monogatari series, which is actually really interesting in that it's the themes of it is all about kind of combating your own personal demons that come out in the form of like supernatural, like people manifesting as like animals or something. Like this one character is like their entire forearm is like the arm of a monkey, so they have to keep it wrapped in bandages because it's kind of a representation of like a lot of bottled up feelings that they can't let go of. And it also plays a lot with like language and like the art is beautiful. The problem is that there is a lot of fan service in it, but it almost feels like the right is we're willing to forgive that and look past that, because it's almost like it's like you compare it to a lot of Western cartoons and animation and just media where at least it looks nice, as opposed to where Western animation is like the problem is it's like there's three types of cartoons now in the West. There's either the stuff like the rebooted Voltron or Avatar Last Airbender stuff of, well, we need to make it look like anime. Or there's the Cal Arts School where everything looks exactly the same. Everyone has the same stupid noodle arms and bean-shaped heads, and that's filled with SJW BS, or it's, well, it has to be like Family Guy, so we're going to make the characters as ugly and unlikable as physically possible. And you're like, yeah, anime looks nicer.
Yeah. No, it's that's actually a thing that I said to a friend once. I had just finished playing the newest Fire Emblem game,
Mhm.
which for anyone who's not aware is of course an anime video game. And it was pretty good. I mean, it was really progressive in a lot of ways, but I still really enjoyed it. But what I had said to a friend once about it was that there is, like, it is like basically 50-50 male female in a battlefield situation, which normally would generally kind of annoy me because of how ridiculous that is. But at least in Fire Emblem and in anime in general, it makes me feel a bit less bad, because I can assume that the reason they have all the females there is because they're cute, not because they want to have egalitarianism.
Yeah, and you also get the idea that it's like a series or a few games that I really liked, because I think I'm really into turn-based tactical shooter games like XCOM. There's Valkyria Chronicles, which is basically World War II in an anime setting.
Yeah,
and they have a lot of female soldiers. But the thing is, in a lot of this, well, they'll have like cool, like looking like female warriors in anime and stuff. They tend to also be very feminine. Like in the first Valkyria Chronicles game, one of the main characters, who's the love interest, she basically ends the game marrying the main character and having a kid with him, and like just wanting to bake bread and be a wife. You don't get the idea that she's just going to be like this, hyper feminist or anything.
Yeah, no, the Valkyrie Chronicles game also, it is at least a militia in a tiny country.
Oh, have you played it?
Yeah, only the original one.
Okay.
But I'd like to get the new one they made recently.
Yeah, 4 is pretty good.
Yeah. But yeah, so at least there's some degree of a lore explanation for it. It isn't just the sort of ridiculous, like, big, strong female warriors. Women can be just as strong as men, sort of thing.
People have this problem of like I hate the dreaded phrase "strong female character," and I think this is pointing to why people are stupid. Is people immediately think, oh, well, strong female character doesn't mean they have a strong character in the sense that they're interesting or have a personality. It's they have to be physically strong, and this is why I hate superhero movies.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is, maybe somewhat ironic that I'm criticizing this female soldier sort of thing, because my favorite saint, other than of course Mother Mary, is probably Joan of Arc.
Okay, yeah,
but she is the, like, perfect embodiment of the sort of female that is forced into that's forced into war.
Even though she didn't really fight that much, she more just was a moral.
Yeah.
But
her, for those of you who aren't aware, her story ended with her begging to go back to her family and tend sheep. So the sort of point of the story of Joan of Arc is that the men were so weak and useless that it required God empowering this woman. Not that, women are like big, strong, and powerful and can do anything a man can.
Somebody said, Metatron said, strong female character equals a man in drag. Yes.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I as much as I think she was a great saint, or I'm not familiar with Joan of Arc, based on my own family history, I have to be on the side of England in that conflict, because my ancestors themselves fought on the English side in the 100 Years' War, and I think they fought at either Tours or Agincourt, or yeah. So
Yeah, I'm kind of, I don't know. I don't really like the term Anglophile. I mean, I'm Canadian. English history is just Canadian history. Though I'm not ethnically British in any way.
I'm almost entirely.
But when I was younger, I was kind of like anti Joan of Arc, like pro Britain and everything, just because of the sort of Anglo connection of Canada. But I don't know, more recently, over the past couple of years, I kind of I always have sympathy for England in pretty much any of its conflicts it's been in, including the 100 Years' War. Again, because I'm Canadian and English history is Canadian history. But when it comes to that war, though I still do have quite a bit of sympathy for the English side, I do sort of see her as as like the patron saint of nationalism. And so I do still sympathize with both sides. But I think it was better that France came out of that as its own distinct country and not as a country sharing a monarch with England.
And then Britain said, all right, fine, we'll just take over the whole world outside of France. But I recently posted a tweet, and it was basically the English fought France for like 600 years over so many different wars. But then they get mad when Germany does it. Because the Germans were good, because of course they understood Germany can just completely flatten France instead of a prolonged conflict.
Yeah.
But so I guess in all of this, like I'm not siding with France or England. I have to side with the Heilige Kaiser, the Holy Roman Empire, because it was based.
Yeah.
But and that's the thing is Charles V almost had complete domination over the continent of Europe except France. Because he was the emperor of the HRE, king of Sicily, and king of Naples, and king of Spain. What else? But something I can't get into is the Fate series, even though here it's all about history, and they have a character that is Joan of Arc in it. I think partially it's for me is that I hate the Isekai genre, and if people don't know what that is, or I don't know if Fate is considered it, but it just led me to this is the Isekai genre is generally like the idea of people being trapped in a fantasy world that's in an MMORPG, like Log Horizon or what's the terrible one? Oh, Sword Art Online. Like I hate it. I hate it so much.
Yeah, I've there's only really ever been one series that I watched like that. Though I generally hate that sort of trapped in a video game, trapped in whatever. Sort of thing because
okay, it's not Isekai. I'm sorry. I don't know. I just wanted to talk about why I hate the genre.
Okay. Yeah. No. I really. I don't know. When I'm watching a show, I like to suspend my disbelief and imagine that it's a real universe going on. Like being explicitly told that this is a fake universe, I don't know, just kind of kills it for me.
For me is I like the opposite one, in which it's somebody that's coming from a fantasy world coming into a normal world. And I think one of my new favorites is The Devil's a Part-Timer, because it's basically in a fantasy dimension. Like I guess in a lot of Japanese versions, Satan and Lucifer are different people, but sorry, never mind. But he's defeated. It starts with him with Satan and his fallen angels being defeated by this group of heroes, and then he's banished or he escapes to modern Tokyo, and it's him basically just trying to survive in modern Tokyo, and he doesn't have any of his powers, like working a shitty job at a fast food restaurant. And the funniest thing is, and like of course it's called, and then like some of the heroes follow him over there, and some of his fallen angels cross over, and it's just that kind of drama of these people that had superpowers being way kind of depowered, and that's interesting. It is a comedy, and it's really funny. And what's fascinating is that he works at the restaurant McDonald's, and like I'm not interested at all in like, oh, what happens to the incredible fantasy world that he left. It's, oh no, they're starting up a KFC across the street. How is he going to deal with the competition? I don't know why, but I just found it really interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure. What show was that?
The Devil is a Part-Timer.
Okay, yeah, I've never heard of that before, but it sounds interesting.
Good.
And to of course defend my favorite saint, I'm going to take on one of these comments. Megathron. I mean, I seriously don't see how she was a figurehead for a dying cause. I mean, she was a figurehead, obviously. But I mean, they succeeded. So I don't know. I mean, I guess they weren't in a great place, and it might have seemed like a dying cause at the time. But I don't see how you can say a cause that that ended up winning was a dying cause. Maybe just mean that it was in a bad place, but
maybe he's talking about how was he talking about her in the Fate series? I don't know anything about
maybe
it.
I don't know.
It doesn't appeal to me, but yeah. What else? What else? Something that I found out, I thought about it, especially when I played the game Sekiro, which is made by the same people that made Dark Souls. Have you ever played any of the Souls games?
I played like 10 minutes of Dark Souls once.
Okay. What Sekiro? It's the latest one. It came out last year.
Yeah,
and
I know what it is.
Okay. It does essentially how I think fantasy should be done, in that it's set in a real time and place, and it's basically the myths and native religion of Japan is real. I know you in the sense that like Buddhist carvings actually give you blessings, and like it has the like giant snakes and stuff that's actually in Japanese folklore being real. And I think that's how you should do fantasy, as opposed to just we're just gonna make this fake weird religion that's semi based off of what we think Catholicism is like. But which brings me to my favorite anime depiction of the Middle Ages, which I think actually does a lot of accuracy, and it's also one of my favorite series, is Spice and Wolf. Have you heard of that?
Yeah. I've never seen it, but I know what it is.
It's because it's set in a quasi-realistic place. It's based on kind of it's based on the Baltic, kind of at the end of the Teutonic Crusades, in which there's only a few pagan villages left. And it's kind of strangely pro-Christian in the sense of, like, they don't portray the church as explicitly evil. Somebody said Spice and Wolf sucks. Fuck you. But it's basically kind of how it's kind of about how paganism has to kind of assimilate into a new Christian series, or into a new Christian society, because the main character is this ancient wolf deity that people have kind of forgotten, and she just kind of wants to leave. But at least in the manga, they basically assert that, we all believe, like everybody in the series, they all talk about how God bless you, and Lord help us all, and all that. Sorry, I'm rambling here, but the point is that there's a great scene in the manga in which there's a daughter of a priestess who, I guess in this universe, priests can be married, and she's trying to take she has a real crisis of faith. Of her father was researching these ancient spirits, and she's like, was my dad a pagan? And then she just comes to the conclusion, well, maybe just creation is more interesting than we thought. It's not that and like she says to the main characters, no, I still believe in the almighty God creator. And Holo, who's the wolf spirit girl, basically says, oh, of course, I'm not a deity at all. But it's good, and its main focus is actually just on a really cool, thorough explanation of medieval economics and the birth of the market revolution.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, one person's calling out your taste in anime. William the Core Prince William III. No, yeah, I mean, to get at one point you said there, honestly, in like 1500 or whatever, in Middle Ages Baltics, it probably would not have been incredibly uncommon for priests to have children.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't really until the Council of Trent that they really enforced the whole not marrying thing.
Mm-hmm. All you needed to know is about anime is that Dragon Ball is black culture, the German Naruto opening completes the system of German idealism, and Pokemon is a Korea psyop. That's something that Argent points out, is that black people seem to be, in his experience, black people, the only anime they like is Dragon Ball. I can't, like, I watched One Piece for a long time, but eventually there's a lot of SJW bullshit in it too, because there's literally a character that has hormone superpowers and like turns men into women, says, this is your true self now. And I'm like, yeah, I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I have just about zero interest in those long form animes. Though the one of the things I like about anime and I don't watch a lot. There's about, I don't know, less than a dozen series that I've watched. But what I do like about the anime that I've watched is that it is that it's is that it tells a sort of continuous story
Yes.
with a beginning,
Yes.
middle, and end. So like 1,000 episodes really does not interest me at all. I one of my closest friends is actually really into Dragon Ball, and he's asked me to watch it many times, and he's always like, oh, like the newest series of Dragon Ball is only like 120 episodes. Like, no, I just like the amount of interest I have in that is pretty close to zero.
The one I'm trying to get into now is Gintama, which is a lesser known one. Like there isn't an English dub of the anime, but I have the manga. But and it's kind of, I guess, like it's a shonen series that's a lot shorter, relatively speaking. But like the premise is interesting. It's basically commenting on what happened, the modernization of Japan, in the sense that like it's, what if instead of like the West coming in and forcing Japan to open up, aliens invaded around the end of the feudal era and kind of confiscated all the samurai's weapons and kind of started immigrating into Japan. So that it has all this kind of high technology, but not quite steampunk. It's like alien technology into this modern Japan, and it's kind of based because the characters are just these kind of hapless romantics that want to go back to the honor of samurais, but like everybody else is like super greedy and obsessed with like consumerism now because they become massively industrialized. And so it's pretty interesting. The premise is really interesting.
Yeah, I've never seen that one either.
And I haven't seen really any fan service so far. I haven't read a lot of it yet, but all right. I forgot. Are you confirmed Catholic yet, or are you still converting?
I'm in RCIA right now.
Okay, good. How is that going?
Sorry,
that's too
mostly
personal.
Good. No, yeah, I'm not embarrassed. It's just, I don't know. It's mostly good. The parish I go to is definitely Orthodox, like Little O, obviously. They're not like I remember I saw a tweet the other day of a guy who claims to run an RCIA program and saying that he shows videos of Joe Biden and Stephen Colbert talking about their faith as like positive examples.
Wait, where is this?
I just, someone on Twitter I saw saying this. It was the actual like guy that said he was running the program. I don't know. He could have been completely made that up. I have no clue. I just saw some of the e-trad people responding to him and insulting him and stuff. But so my parish definitely isn't anything like that.
Okay.
It's fully Orthodox. We actually had at the beginning of the season, we had this one girl who was clearly a sort of like college SJW type, but was interested in Catholicism for whatever reason. And after we got to the part on sodomy, she left pretty quickly. There's actually a really funny conversation between her and the old dude that was running it. She said, "Oh, does that mean that Catholics can't support social justice then?" And he said, "Catholics are required to support social justice." But of course, they were both using completely different definitions of those words.
Remember Charles? Have you heard of Father Charles Cowlin?
Yeah.
Have you seen his video where he's talking about his epic speech?
No. I'm vaguely familiar with his like history and stuff, but I haven't seen any videos from him.
Oh, somebody said we haven't talked about Attack on Titan or Berserk. I haven't read Berserk, but I've seen some of Attack on Titan, and it's good. It's just a lot of anime for me is like you have to be in a mood to watch it. But and apparently a lot of people on the left have criticized it for basically they call it's promoting fascism. So it can't be all bad.
Yeah.
It's basically saying when you're actually being invaded by these disgusting when you're actually being invaded by horrible monsters, it's you have every right to just try and kill as many of them as you can. But the other manga I've been reading, because it doesn't have an anime yet, is Komi Can't Communicate, which is it's kind of like a meme character, or it's been a lot. I got it from a lot of like it's a lot. It's in a lot of memes, and it's basically like, because I recently watched Goblin Slayer and Akame ga Kill, which are both end pretty dark and are pretty depressing. And so I'm like, I just want to read about this girl who wants to make friends and she can't communicate. But yeah. What else? I'm sorry I'm rambling, but I like talk. I don't have anybody else to talk about anime with except for you and Argent. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just what the point I was making about RCIA before. It's so my parish is definitely like Orthodox. Like, you know, they're not going to be like, you know, saying that anything that we know is evil is okay or anything like that. My main problem with it though is they're all just nothing but a bunch of boomers.
Mm-hmm.
And it really gets on my nerves sometimes. It just, I don't know, it seems it just is like two very different sort of mannerisms and ways you know, interacting and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been around a lot of I've been around a lot of different Catholic groups and stuff before, and it just these sort of boomer cons are kind of annoy me. I fit much better with different groups before.
Yeah, unfortunately, my parish is actually somewhat liberal. There's a younger, more conservative priest, and like in my conversations with him, he's basically said, like, you know, if you kind of bring up like, you know, I like incense. Why don't we use incense more? Why don't we do more traditional stuff? And he basically says it's because there's not really anything he can do since he's not the pastor of the parish. And that's the kind of sad thing, is a lot of younger conservative priests, because that's the nice, I get optimistic note, right? Is that younger priests tend to be far more conservative, but the problem is that they can't, until they become pastors of their own parishes, there's not really all that much they can do when older boomer era priests are still there.
Yeah. And to respond to Norkia, or however you pronounce that, yeah, I definitely, I've been around some university Catholic clubs before, and I found the people there, they're not really like a full parish, or I've never been around like a full Catholic parish in a university or anything like that, but I've been in like university Catholic clubs, and they tend to be very solid. I haven't really had much of a problem with them. They tend to be very conservative and orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
I did. There was one girl I met there who I added a lot of people on my personal Facebook and stuff, and she was this past federal election. She was putting out a bunch of stuff about how much she loves abortion. But generally speaking, they're pretty based and pro-life and all that sort of stuff. There's just
we don't celebrate abortion. That's why we have literal celebrations of abortion.
Yeah. No, I mean that's, you know, that's one of the things I appreciate about Catholicism, is the teachings are at least clear. Because if I'm with a Protestant and they say, "Oh, I love abortion," then I know immediately where they're going to go is like the Bible never explicitly mentions abortion. So then we need to have this big argument about a bunch of different verses on like, oh, does the Bible approve abortion or not? When the obvious answer is it doesn't. And
that's the thing, is that liberal Christianity is essentially, you can believe whatever you want, and it's what Fulton Sheen said, where in the modern West we want Christ without the cross, and in the East they have the cross without Christ. You have to have both. You can't just be you can't just be like, I just want all the benefits of believing in God, but with none of the actual requirements. And that's something Distributed said about there was the author Anne Rice, who years ago kind of came back to the Christian faith, but then immediately left, in his words, explicitly, because when she found out that being a Christian requires any amount of resistance to the modern world. But and the thing is, Catholicism, that you're completely right on Catholicism, is that you don't have to have this endless debate over what does the Bible say, because there's actually a correct interpretation of it. And in the Catechism, the problem is that Catholicism has is that our leadership seems completely unwilling or unable to actually, tell people this.
Yeah.
The U.S. like there's the meme I love of, it's like the black guy sleeping, like, and it's like him asleep on all of these actually important issues, like a generation addicted to porn, an economy based on usury, mass abortion, and just the U.S. CCB is completely asleep. The second, though, anybody talks about immigrants or global warming, that's when that's when they wake up and tell people, oh no, you can't vote for Donald Trump. But
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, my local parish, like I said, they're not like, super based in trad, and they're not Latin mass or anything like that. But they are fully Orthodox. I mean, I've gone to evangelical churches my entire life, until like the past 2 years. And of all the evangelical churches I went to, they never once really explicitly talked about any of the sort of social issues. One church I went to did talk about porn a lot, though that was the only social issue the pastor would ever touch. But other than that, they'd occasionally say something like, oh, the things our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau are doing with gender isn't what we believe. But like that's what they'd leave it at. They wouldn't even say what he's doing. They'd just say something vague like that. But of the just like less than 2 years I've been going to a Catholic parish, they talk about abortion. They talk about they talk about euthanasia. They talk about all type of stuff very frequently, like at least once a month, probably.
Somebody's saying I should check out Vinland Saga, which has a lot of Christianity in it. Or it seems fairly neutral on it. I'm just hoping it's better than the History Channel show Vikings, which is, well, we want to be Game of Thrones. I hate that History Channel now. I have to rant on this of like fucking boomers ruin that channel, because it used to be, oh, we're gonna have history, and then it's gonna be nothing but Hitler documentaries, and then it's gonna be nothing but conspiracy theories. Now it's just an unending reruns and cycle of American Pickers, of these two gay guys talking about, oh, look, I got this new piece we can get. I don't think, like, it used to have Engineering an Empire with hosted by freaking RoboCop Peter Weller, because the guy who played RoboCop, which if you haven't seen RoboCop, it is probably the best movie ever made. He's an actor that has a PhD from my area in history, from a university where my dad grew up. He has a degree in I think he has a PhD in history from the University of Syracuse, New York, and he hosted Engineering an Empire, which is actually really interesting.
Yeah, I've honestly, I've never seen that movie.
Oh, okay. What's interesting about it is, like, it's a massive critique at that time of the 1980s about how kind of soulless corporate America is. But it's wrapped up in, like, oh, it's this cop that's also a robot and blows up criminals, but like it has a whole bunch of like it's a satire.
Yeah,
it's also just really good. The best line of the movie is "bitches leave," and when you see that line, it is the most 80s thing ever. But yeah. What is there anything else you want to talk about, or?
No, not in particular.
No, the American Picker. I was making a joke. The American Picker guys are not gay. I don't think so. The thing is, even if History Channel was doing history again, I don't think I'd watch it, because, since I have a degree in it, like, I need something that's a little more meaty and intellectual. Yeah. But like, it was good for just introducing people to ideas of history.
Yeah, no, I mean, when I was a kid, I enjoyed it quite a bit, though I know it's been probably more than half my life since I've seen since I've actually sat down and watched it. But I think now is probably a good time to end.
Yeah, it's been here for an hour and a half.
Yeah,
but yeah, watch anime. It's a lot of it's based, and become Catholic. Yep,
both of that's true. And please, if you're not already subscribe to me. Also subscribe to Fritz. I'll have his channel in the description, and yeah, and also share my stuff. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Have a good night.